Well, thank you for coming. I look forward to having a discussion here tonight. I know that there might be a lot of questions that people have, and I'll do my best to answer them. I want to give you a little bit of background for those who may not know me. First of all, I'll ask by the raise of hands, who's, I guess, ever been to an event of mine before or heard me speak before? Or who, let's do it, sorry. Let's do it the other way around. Who hasn't? Okay, so there's more than half that haven't. And I kind of saw the hands that were raised first. So anyway, good. We hope that that I'm able to communicate with you at least to the level where you can understand me, right? I'm here running for governor. I am wanting to gain your confidence as somebody who you would vote for, someone who you would want to be your next governor. There's no secrets that that's what I'm doing. And so I hope that we can have a discussion here tonight and that you'll be honest with yourself as I am honest with you. And as we look at really what is happening in Idaho and what we need to do to secure our liberties, secure our property, secure our right to worship, and many other things. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background of who I am, kind of what's in my blood. I was raised in southern Nevada. I was raised on a ranch just south of Mesquite, Nevada, Bunkerville, Mesquite area, if you've ever gone through there. You go down through Utah and you're headed to Las Vegas, you go right through Mesquite. And when you climb that big mesa, if you go down the river, about years old when they finished that home, and he lived in a little wood shack right next to that, and then they moved into that home, and that's the home I was raised in, and that's the home my dad still lives in. And any of you might know that down there in the desert, and it's pretty arid and dry, it gets really hot. You know, we've seen temperatures to 123 degrees before, and that'll hold that. And it's very hot. And it wasn't until 2017, when my dad wasn't there, that my mom put in air conditioning. We just had swamp coolers. And I grew up without an air conditioner. I grew up without air conditioning in the vehicle. And so, and the home is about a 1,200 square foot home. And I have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. And I remember my oldest sibling is a girl, and then there's a whole bunch of boys. And then there's some girls later on down, but when I was in the mix of that, it was just a whole bunch of boys and my older sister. And it was a 2-bedroom house. So at one point, my dad gave my sister the room of her own, and all the rest of us had to be in the other room. And, that's the kind of things that I grew up in. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I actually like and enjoy that I didn't, because I believe that I can relate to, those situations. I remember getting up. We got up really early because we had a whole bunch of chores to cows and do all those things. And then we got on the bus, because I did go to public school, but it was about an hour bus drive. And so we got on the bus at 6:15 in the morning. And just to get to school the school started at 7:15. And so in order to get any chores done, you got to get up really early, and then you didn't want to stink like cow, right, to go to school. So then you had to shower and get ready, and then we were always running, and the bus driver was always honking on the horn, and because we had to run up to the road, which is probably, not quite a fourth of a mile to get on the bus. And that was how I grew up. And I do remember one time that the bus driver actually came down and got us. And anyway, and the other part about all of this is that I was able to really be free. I mean, we were on the range, we were out of town, I mean, we could ride four-wheelers or ride horses for, it's 80 miles from our house to the Grand Canyon, which is the bottom of the ranch. So, I mean, exploring and enjoying that land, and, you know, it was always something that I really loved, and something that there was always places that I could go that I'd never been before, even on the range, growing up my entire life. And there were certain places that I really enjoyed more than others. But I do believe that living growing up the way I grew up, and living the way we lived, it did give me a sense of love for the land, love for my family and neighbors, and a love for freedom. And that is in me, and I won't deny that, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of that at all. And I believe, you know, that all people should have that opportunity, and I believe that we can, and that should be afforded to us. And so we don't all have to live on a ranch, but we all should be able to be free, and we should be able to exercise that liberty, and we should be able to enjoy and understand what the earth and the land brings to us. And I'm grateful that I was raised the way I was raised. I'm grateful for my father and my mother for teaching me the things that I was taught. You know, at times I was pretty stubborn, I will admit that. But I think that that's part of growing up, and part of just going through that. Now, I will say this. My father came to me when I was about 15 years old, and he says that basically the ranch isn't big enough for the both of us. And that wasn't because we were always butting heads. It was just because the ranch wasn't enough to provide for more than a couple families. Just the way it was. Even though it's a huge area, it takes 100 acres to provide enough food for one cow. So, you know, we talk about here, we have a cow per acre, a cow and a half per acre, or whatever. There's different type of land. Well, down there, it's 100 acres for one cow. And it's desert. It's cactus. It's you know, there's barrel cactus and Joshua trees, and there's, you know, a lot of the cactus you see in the desert. You know, and then there's some shrub. And certain times of the year it'll rain and it'll get little grass all over, and the cows will actually get fat on it. But it takes a lot of land to produce enough for one cow. So you gotta run cattle on a huge area, which costs a lot of money. And as you know, it's very hard to gather them. Then they end up being more like you're deer hunting rather than you're gathering the cattle. We always tease about that. Because there was times growing up where we would ride for 3 days before we run into a herd of cattle. And gathering like that is difficult. The way we actually gather the most is we have waters that we have run pipe all over the desert, over a 30-mile span. And they come from, when my forefathers came into that area in 1877, and they began to capture the water on the mountainside, on the foothills of the mountains, these little springs, and then they began to pipe them all throughout the desert. And my father, in his 75 years, has piped that water as well, has added to that, until now there's water pipes and troughs everywhere, and it's increased everything. The wildlife, now the cattle can live out there. You know, you got more rabbits and coyotes, and you got more deer and mountain lions and everything because of simply having water out on the desert. And the way we gather our cattle mostly is we'll put a trap corral around the water. And they have to come in for water, and they trip the gate, and they come in, and now they're trapped in. And then we go and we work them, or we gather the calves, or whatever it is we need to do with them, and then we'll turn them out back on the range again. And that's mostly how my dad is able to manage the cattle. So you see, the operation is a lot different than, you know, having, you know, a couple hundred acres and you have, you know, some cows in it. And it just has to be that way. But the thing is my dad is able to produce a commodity for the American people on that desert where no one else wanted to, or no one else could in many cases. They didn't want to do it. And even though it's a very hard, rugged life, my dad has done that. And he loves to produce a commodity for the American people. And he says that commodity is red meat. That's what he produces, is red meat. That's what he offers to the people of America. Red meat, grown on the southern Nevada desert. And he doesn't ask for help to do it. He doesn't ask for handouts. He doesn't take government funds. He doesn't do any of that. He just wants to be left alone on his ranch like my forefathers have done for 5 generations now. Just to raise cattle and produce red meat for the American people. And so, like I said, though, I wanted to do that too, but there wasn't enough room. And so when I was old enough, I first left the home and I went and served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I went to Minnesota for 2 years, taught people about Christ and the atonement, and that gave me a better understanding and a better reasoning about life. And I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity. And then I came home and I went to school at Southern Utah University in Cedar City, Utah, and started my business. I started a business there. And at first it was changing oil, and it became basically changing oil and managing commercial trucks, fleets and so forth. But Cedar City just didn't have very many fleets, It wasn't enough to keep me busy and going. But I stayed there because I felt like I was supposed to stay there. And ultimately I know now I was meant to stay there until I met somebody, and that was my wife. I met my wife. She came down to school there, and I met her and fell in love with her, and I think she fell in love with me, and I convinced her later if she didn't. And I married her, and then 4 months later, we moved to Arizona. Took my business down there, and there was a lot more fleets, and I was able to, use my equipment and services, and I ended up building a very large fleet maintenance company in Arizona. In fact, it became one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona, and ended up doing really, really well down there, and just worked hard. And so again, I'm trying to express to you my experience so that to see if I would qualify in your mind for somebody who can run the state of Idaho. And I just want you to know that I have run and started from scratch and built a business up, one business and then another that have become multi-million-dollar businesses. I've hired hundreds of people. I have dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and I have unified people in a cause under a certain vision in order to get something done that was valuable for other people, that people would actually pay money for, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't spend their money at my business. And so I have lived under that circumstance and ran that business for 21 years. Since then, I have sold that business. But before I sold it, I also saw that the industry is in great need of software because, it's kind of a fleet maintenance, a heavy-duty commercial truck shop and managing all the oil changes and transmission services and liftgate repairs and all of these maintenances. And it became a really hard thing for us to do, and it was even harder for our customers to do because they were focused on something else. And so we ended up deciding, because it wasn't out there, the software wasn't out there, we ended up deciding that we would create our own software. And so I hired the right people and got them and got a team together, and we began building a software, and it took us about 3.5 years. And we tested it. My customers were guinea pigs. And I communicated with them and say, look, we're building this software. We want to try it out on you. And they'd be like, okay. So we would try it out, and they'd give feedback. And I had great relationships with my customers, my vendors, my technicians, office staff, and my parts suppliers, and all of that. And so I was able to use the shop in that scenario, which was perfect for building a software. I was able to use it to build this software that really made a huge difference in my shop. And then we decided, and we kind of had this plan to begin with, we decided that we were going to now start selling it to other shops. And so we did, and now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. It's sold all over the country and all over in Canada. And then a few years ago, I sold that as well. So I sold that, and I bought a few commercial properties in Emmett. And that's basically my business background. And I started both those from scratch. And I've done a few other things. I built up a little side business, trucking, and then I sold that. And then I built up a few other little parts pieces that never were really that big, but they were successful. And so that's who I am business-wise. That's what I've done in my life as far as being an entrepreneur and being a business person. And I like to do that stuff. Since then, 2020 rolled around, and I didn't like what was going on, so I began to unite people, and several people in here know and have met many times with People's Rights Group. Well, ultimately, I built a software there as well, where it communicates very easily with your community through mass text, mass email, secure messaging, ham radio, and that's the network that we've built up, and that network now has right around 60,000 people in it. And we made a huge difference and pushed back on a lot of the stuff all over the western United States and even into like Florida and that type of stuff. Those people were using our system to communicate in order to, preserve liberty and unite as a people. And then also we're building a software for the campaign right now that's been very, very helpful. And so that's kind of me, I guess, a little bit in a nutshell in what I've been doing for the last 25 years of my life. And I am 46 years old. I just turned 46 on September 1st. And I've got a beautiful wife, and I have 6 children. My oldest is 19. She's married, and now they're up in Moscow, and I hope they don't listen to all those liberals up there. I think they're good. She's pretty solid. She's pretty awesome, actually. And then my youngest is 6 years old. I have 3 boys, 3 girls. And, go Emmett Huskies. I've got 2 boys on the football team. And I love what they're doing. That's been fun to see. They're totally the underdogs. They had them ranked at like number 3 this year. In the whole, and they're undefeated in the conference. Last year they had it ranked at what I mean by number 3, the third to the bottom. I didn't say that right. I said it just opposite. Third to the bottom. That's where they had them ranked. And now they're undefeated in the conference. And in fact, it's an insult when you get invited and you get scheduled for your homecoming, for someone else's homecoming, right? That means that they don't think you're going to be very good. And last year they lost 27 seniors. 27 seniors graduated. So they thought that the Husky football team was going to be lousy this year. And 4 schools scheduled their homecoming with the Emmett Huskies. And they've gone to every one of them and spoiled their homecomings. It's been awesome. Anyway, I enjoy that. I love football. I played football myself when I was in high school. I mean, ever since junior high school, I was my senior year, I was the starting fullback, and I was also defensive end. And for a period there, me and one other guy was leading the state in quarterback sacks. So anyway, I haven't expressed that before, but I do love football, and I especially love watching my boys play football. So, all right. With that being said, I want to turn the time over to you to ask questions, and I will answer. So you notice you didn't have to write your question down when you come in, and then you notice that my staff isn't back there picking out the good questions. I don't do it that way. I want to be open with you. I want you to be able to ask me the questions that might be in your heart, that are concerning you. maybe you don't understand something. And it could be anything from what's happening in the state to something that policy or something that I'm pushing for, or maybe something in my life. The only thing I've said is the disclaimer is that if it's personal, something personal between my wife and I, then I won't answer that most likely. And the closest we've got to that is a guy asked me, he says, you've been married for 20 years, and have you ever had to compromise? Because he was comparing what I might have to do in government. And I said, well, I have been married for 20 years, right? So that's about it. So right here.
So Ammon, I know that you understand the Constitution, but how did you learn? So is that something that was taught in your family? Did you have discussions around the table about the U.S. Constitution and law?
Well, yes, but it was complete out of necessity. I mean, my family was literally being, the federal government was trying to take our ranch, and they were claiming that it was theirs. And we're going, how could it be possibly theirs? We've got these deeds with the state. We've been here for 5 generations since 1877. And so and it really wasn't in my generation, it was more the end of my grandfather's and then my dad's, that they didn't know. And they had to go deep into the Constitution, into the history, and into the Federalist Papers and all these things in order to understand the Constitution and its intent and how it applied to them and how it applied to the Western states, how it applied to this land that's being controlled by the federal government. And then we've had to defend that position in court multiple times, including defending ourselves when they threw us in prison. And so I just don't think we probably would have done it, at least to the level we have, without actually out of necessity. But yeah, I did actually spend time with my father. I'm going to go here and then here. Did actually spend time with my father and brothers, trying to understand the Constitution. So.
My question is more general.
Okay.
If you are to become governor of this state, what are you going to do about controlling the influx of the drugs that are flowing into Idaho?
The influx of drugs. Okay, can you express what influx of drugs are coming in and how they're coming in?
Well, they're coming in through over the Mexican border and up that high, up that pathway. However they come in, that's how they're coming in. And I can't believe everything I see on the news, but they said that Idaho is one of the new states that they have found more open to the ability to get them in here, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of amphetamines and things like that coming in.
Yeah, so the drugs are an interesting thing because we know that the state doesn't have jurisdiction over our bodies, right? Or do they? Do they have
Not mine.
So it doesn't. Are you sure? Then how are they stopping you from putting drugs into your body? So I'm asking you, does the state have jurisdiction over your body or other people's body?
Well, not really, but I mean, we make the decision to take the drugs or take whatever we want, but isn't there some way that the state can control the flow of drugs into the state?
Well, yeah, they can do more force, more police agencies. They can build a wall around Idaho.
Yay.
They can, we can, but we have to be willing to pay for that, and we have to be willing to deal with the results of that, because almost all walls that have been built around people end up being walls to keep people in rather than keep people out, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to be willing to do that. But my question comes down to, and I want to answer your question, but I want to get down to the principle. Does the state have jurisdiction over your body or not? So does that mean that the state can tell you what you can put into your body? No? Then where does the state get the authority to regulate drugs?
Federal, that's a federal.
So the federal government has jurisdiction over our bodies?
No. But the federal laws are drug laws, they say what.
Yeah, I mean, our state has, yeah, they definitely influence it, right? But I'm asking, where did the state get authority to tell you what you can put into your body? Or what you can't put into your body? Where did they get that authority?
The point is not what you put into your body, it's how do you keep that from coming in so that, you know, these kids aren't just.
I'm preparing you for my answer though. Because it's completely different than you think. Because most of you are thinking we have to have more force, we have to put more force upon the people, we have to have more law enforcement, we have to put more money into it, we have to give the state more power in order to stop this terrible thing that's coming into our state. That's what a lot of people think. Maybe I should take the, maybe I shouldn't assume, right? I don't believe that at all. If you want to stop drugs from coming into Idaho, illegal drugs from coming into Idaho,
Stop the demand.
Teach your kids.
what's that?
You stop the demand.
Well, first of all, what were you going to say? Or who said that? Who started
Teach
saying it?
your
Yeah.
kids- Teach your kids not to do drugs.
Yeah, you strengthen the family. You strengthen the family. You strengthen the church. And you teach people to choose not to put drugs into your body. Right? That's the answer. And that's what I'm proposing in my Keep Idaho, Idaho plan. You do, because what it comes down to is you cannot force people to be good. Let's use the Prohibition. Prohibition is a great example. Who remembers the Prohibition? Now, come on. You don't look like you're that old. But let's break the Prohibition down, okay? Yeah. I didn't say probation. So let's just break it down a little bit. What happened during the Prohibition?
They banned the sale of liquor.
Yeah, it was good Christian people thinking that they got to use the state to force other people to be good. To force, right? What happened during that time?
Oh, they made a lot of booze.
It was, yeah, it was the worst era, the most crime, the most alcohol consumption in the history of our country. And it went on for, 11 or 13 years, 11 years, 11 or 13 years.
The mechanism to which they did the payoffs is still going on today with drugs.
Well, yeah, let's,
The same stuff.
yeah, I'm gonna get into that. You're a step ahead of me on everything. So, he's done his homework. So, we learned our lesson. Well, we didn't learn our lesson. We should have learned our lesson. The lesson is still there for us to learn. They made alcohol illegal. They tried to regulate it. They tried to block the roads. They tried to patrol. Alcohol consumption went up tremendously. The price of alcohol went crazy high, and so then there was a black market that was created. And then in order to stop the black market, Congress created the FBI. Right? And they created the FBI so they could crack down on these mobsters that were making millions off of illegal alcohol sales.
Does that mean that you legalize the drugs, that's gonna make it better?
Well, did it make it better in the Prohibition?
Well, no,
So you wanted to catch me on that.
they didn't legalize alcohol, they banned alcohol.
That's what I'm saying. When they banned it,
Then it,
consumption went up.
so,
The price of alcohol went up when they banned alcohol, right? And law enforcement, they created law enforcement agencies for the very purpose, oh, thank you, for the very purpose of trying to, make it, patrol it and keep it limited. And then they created a black market. Well, because of the cost of alcohol, they created a black market, which then created crime, quote unquote crime, right? Because now people could get rich off of alcohol, black market alcohol. And what caused all of it?
Demand illegal.
They made it illegal. And what was the solution? It was so bad, 13 years later, I believe, Congress said, look, this was such a failure that they had to make alcohol legal again. Because why? You can't force people to be good. You can't force people to be good.
Well, I know, but those of us that raise our children right, my kids don't do drugs. Maybe a lot of these people have raised their children right. Your children probably don't do drugs because they're from a Christian home. My point is, what's gonna happen to these children that aren't raised right? How are we going to prevent them? I mean, we can't.
We're gonna force them to be good?
How can we force them to be good?
You can't force them to be good, that's the point.
So how do you stop that cycle?
Well, there was a time when our churches were reaching out to those people, when our neighbors were reaching out to those people, when we were teaching them principles by having them into their home and taking them under our arm. There was a time when we did that. You know that time better than I know that time. And that was the strength of our nation. It wasn't more law enforcement, more laws, more restriction. It was not that. It was opposite.
People taking responsibility for themselves and their family. Getting back to God is what this country really needs more than anything.
I agree. I absolutely
And
agree.
people need to take responsibility and quit trying to build government up.
Well, and
Less government would be a lot better.
you're exactly right. And you know what it is? We don't want to do what it is that necessary for us to do. We would rather subcontract it to government and somehow think that that's going to solve the problem. It's not. And to be honest with you, if you want the answer that I'm going to give you, I do not believe that the state should be making it illegal. Why? The same reason alcohol. And anybody wants to argue with me? Then argue with me about it.
I will say one thing though, methamphetamines will rip a family apart quicker than anything else. There's a difference between methamphetamines, cocaine, hard drugs, and alcohol. And that's the thing that scares the crap out of me and these young families, and a young child gets mixed up in it because of poor decision. I'm not talking about an adult, I'm talking about a child. Gets mixed up into it, and once they try it, they can't stop it. It destroys
So
them.
what's gonna make them want it more than anything else? The
They're not
prohibition
having it.
policy.
I understand. That's
By not,
from a
by-
libertarian point of view, right, tell them they can't have it, but there has to be another solution to that, besides, like you said, outlawing it. I agree with you.
the
I don't
solution
think-
is the family teaching them, the church teaching
But her
them.
point-
That's the
Her
solution.
point was that, what about the families that don't exist? They're gonna put such a strain on the state when those kids go bonkers on methamphetamines.
You mean it's worse than they are right now?
Well, they could get
More
worse.
bonkers than they are right now?
It could get
What are you
much worse.
talking? No, how, the prohibition, we've learned our
Yeah.
lesson.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't work. It does not work.
I agree with you. It
The
doesn't work.
consumption of drugs will drop, and it's happened in many countries. There's several other countries and several other areas, and, vote for me or not. You gotta answer what works, what's proven to work.
I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying that this is a more complicated situation than just make it legal, is my opinion, and I think there has to be some sort of middle road, where we are telling the people
What?
that, yeah,
Where is that middle road?
I don't know.
There is no middle
I don't
road
have
for
the
that.
answer.
Go ahead.
So there's a multitude of studies that have been done that show that the more money that we put into education, the less we put into the judicial system. Our country is backwards. You know it, right? So we watch down in Middleton how they keep turning down bonds to create another elementary school. We don't want our taxes to go up by, $15, $20 a month. And so education is one of the best ways to stop illegal drug use. If we put the money into the education system, we don't see that in the judicial system.
So, again, where's the family coming in? The family, it is the unit in which God has created man to teach and to foster. And if you have a government institution that is taking the replace of a family, then, and the government institution is not going to do it near as good as the family will, then what you do is you're actually enabling the family, and you're causing more societal problems because you're basically, the society, if you will, is producing children that haven't been taught between right and wrong, that don't have the moral boundaries that they should have. And as our founder said, that the Constitution is no good for an immoral people. And so you know, we can discuss this, but again, where does the state have authority? Where did the people give the state authority to control your body? What about your children's body? Then where do they have jurisdiction to restrict that? That's the ultimate answer. Where did the people give them that?
We gave our elected representatives the power to restrict it because of the detrimental effects on society of those drugs. We as a people.
Who gave them that? I didn't.
No, we.
Does
we
it
elected-
say it in the
We
Constitution?
elected individuals to represent us to make the laws. And I
No,
agree, there's
no,
problems.
no. The law is this.
Right.
We elected representatives to create statutes for the state. Right? We're supposed to be free, and the statutes in the state are supposed to protect that freedom.
Right.
And nowhere have we given the authority to the state to determine what we put in our body.
Right.
And if you could show me where that is, they've usurped it, that's for sure. Because if I put something into my body, then I could actually be arrested and thrown into federal prison for 10 years. For simply doing something. It could be a plant I grew myself. It could be, something. So, do you see the problem here? And we have to ask ourselves, you might go away, not liking what I'm saying. You have to ask yourself, what is the correct principle? What is the authority of government? And what works? And that's what I'm standing on. What is the correct principle? What is the authority that the people have given government? And what works? And that's what I'm going to stand on. That's what I'll continue to stand on. And you get to decide whether you're going to vote for me or not. But I'm telling you, what is going on now is not working.
Right.
It's not the correct principle. Right? It's not. And they're doing it outside their authority. And so you have to have somebody that's going to ask the question, what's the correct principle? What's the government authority? And what works? Because it's not working right now. And the reason why it's not working in a lot of sense is because good people keep thinking and funding government and supporting government on an idea of trying to make other people do something that they think is right. And that's the path we've gone down right here.
Okay.
Thank
can
you
I
for your
change the
patience.
subject- Change the subject altogether.
That's all right.
Because as governor, I know that you believe in the state's rights and trying to protect the state from the federal and stuff. Do you have anybody in mind that's gonna be your team to help you protect us from like freedom of speech, gun rights, and all this other stuff that's going on, just like some other governors are doing?
No, I'm gonna do it all myself.
No, I know. You got anybody in mind, though? Have you got people in mind?
All right, so I have a tremendous amount of people that I rely on for help. I rely on for advice. I have the confidence of several people in the legislature at this time. I have a lot of people that aren't quite brave enough to support me in public, but they are brave enough to support me and that all changes as soon as you become the winner. All of a sudden now, those people were with you the whole time, They've always supported you. But yeah, I haven't done what I have done without a tremendous a lot of help. I mean, a tremendous amount of help. And good principled help. And I do believe that I will be able to unite the legislature. There's a scripture that I enjoy and read many times, and that is the people perish without a vision, right? Without a vision, the people perish. I think I got it backwards, and that is something that I will be able to do. That's something I have done in the past. I mean, many of you may know, at least some of you may know, that there have been incidences like what happened at my father's ranch, and what happened to the Hammond family in Oregon, where I have been able to gather and unite tens of thousands of people in a very short period of time, in a very stressful and actually dangerous situation for the defense of a family or a person or an individual. I have been able to do that, and no one could dispute that I've done that. I mean, I have clearly been able to do that, and that's one of the that's one of the talents and gifts that I have been given from God. There's other talents and gifts that other people have that I don't have. That's one of the ones I have. And I do believe and have full confidence that I will be able to inspire, empower, and unite the legislature under true leadership. And it needs it desperately. Our legislature needs it desperately. I could go into that maybe sometime during this meeting we can, or later. But our legislature is very, very weak. They're very, very manipulated and controlled. And there's true leadership that needs to be applied there. And I hope to be able to do that. So hopefully that answers your question. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just thought maybe you had some people in mind that are already in the government
Oh,
that
yeah.
could help you and that you could name, or that, you know, to make sure that, like DeSantis does the things to protect the state of Florida, we
Mhm.
need the same leadership here.
Absolutely. Yeah, but the difference between DeSantis and another governor is that he has the guts enough to do it. He's just going to say, I'm going to do it. And then he gathers the people he needs to and supports them around him, and they're with him. And he leads them in doing that. But we haven't had anybody with any guts for the last 40 years. We haven't. Or even understands. Yeah, they've used the state to empower themselves. They've done, they've got by. But we're not in a time that we can do that anymore. We have to have somebody that's going to stand and defend our rights. And what is the mechanism that our founders put in place to defend our rights? First of all, the federal government, right? Well, that wasn't first, but I'm just going to say that. They were supposed to defend our rights against the outside world, right? If the world came down upon the states and the people, federal government had the duty to defend them, right? And then, if they failed, or if the federal government turned their sights upon the people, the states are there to stop the federal government from doing that. And goes down into the counties even, the county sheriffs, and their role and duty. And then that power comes from the people, and that right comes from the people. And so it is the duty of the state to defend the people's rights, even from the federal government. And maybe even especially, I should say. But it takes somebody who's going to do that. And, I've proven, contrary to the media, that I have done it peacefully.
Contrary to the media.
Right? So right here and then right here.
Did you beat the trespassing charge yet?
I appealed the one, and so it's still in process. And then,
What did you get, trespassing and then?
trespassing, and then I wouldn't, comply. I wouldn't walk for them, wouldn't do all that for them, so they charged me with the resisting arrest.
You got trespassed twice, and then one got dropped, right?
Yeah, I got trespassed, well, I actually ended up getting trespassed 4 times at the Capitol building, right?
Not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't over that. It wasn't over mask.
The mask has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I know like in other places, like in the school board meetings and the health districts, but basically what happened at the Capitol building is they were wanting to pass an immunity bill so that the governor and these big corporations like the hospitals, if they did something like force vaccinations on somebody and then they had an adverse reaction to it or a death, that the hospital would be liable. That's what the governor was trying to pass. Well, so we go there in August of 2020, and there's 300 plus people there that we had gathered and got there, and the governor and the Speaker of the House, Bedke, and these others that were trying to push this stuff were very concerned that we were going to influence the legislature not to pass the bill, right? Because we were having an impact on them by having every room full and the hallways all full, and we were, and so they targeted me and basically came in the Lincoln Auditorium when the Lincoln Auditorium is always closed at 7 p.m. They came in at 5:05, said that it was closed at 5 o'clock, and they trespassed and arrested me. And that's basically what happened. So then what did I do? I went back the next day, and they arrested me again. And that case was dismissed, but the first one wasn't. So then later I went back again, they arrested me, and later I went back again. And I did that strategically for a purpose that I am still playing out. An Ada County jury found me guilty on the first try, and I appealed that. And which is crazy, to be honest with you, it's absolutely crazy, but you know, anyway, I could go into details, but this is all part of the fight. It's all part of what we have to do. We have to have a right to go to the Capitol building and to influence peacefully the legislature. We have to have that right. We have to be able to go into our meetings and be able to have that discussion. We have to. So anyway, I think you, and then right here, you were going to ask.
So there's, the federal government's talking about forcing employers to mandate the vaccine. And I saw your stance on that earlier. I kind of agree with it, that it's the employer's decision. But with the heavy hand of federal government coming down and forcing employers down to do that, how's your stance on that, given that light?
Okay, so remember, correct principles, proper jurisdiction, and then what was the last one I was saying? Okay, good. What works? So that's why now correct principles is if we pay money to the state, then we have rights and interest in that, right? All of us. And we pay our taxes, you know, we fund the government. Well, then our rights are in that interest. And we have representatives that are supposed to protect that right in government. And so now, if that money that comes from us goes down to a hospital that says they're a private company, well, they're not private, right? They're not so private. And our representatives then would have a say in what that hospital does with that money and the influence that money brings, right? Does that make sense, right? It follows our right. Let's say $1 is a right. We give $1 to the state. Our representatives decide that they're going to give that $1 here, or, you know. So there's a difference between a quote-unquote private company who takes public funds and a private company who doesn't take public funds. There's a difference, right? What is that difference? Our interest in it, right?
Because they're taking public.
Our interest in it. And so therefore, when it comes to the state saying, look, we're not going to allow you to mandate this and this and that, they have an influence in a hospital that took $100 million from the state to function, right? And that's how the federal government controls the whole world, right? They give federal money, and you have to sign a contract that you'll be obedient to them. And they do it to hospitals, they do it to the state, they do it to the school boards, they do it to private businesses. Well, I guess they don't become private, they're not too private if they do that, but you get what I'm saying, right? And so my position, because you asked a question, I'm not trying to evade it. I'm just trying to get to the right principles so you can accept what my answer is, right? And that is that as governor, if there's some legitimate funds that are flowing down to government institutions, private institutions, then I would say, look, you are not to mandate, or you will not get any more funds, or you won't, or if you agreed to this already, to comply and do those things, then I would stop that there, okay? Now, so basically, government institutions and private institutions that are receiving funds, use that to stop this mandate. When it comes to private, this is what I believe the solution there. Does a private employer have a right, a private company have a right to require something on an employee? Well, let's just leave it at that. Does the private company have a right to require something of an employee?
In order to get the job, yes. If you're already an employee, they can't do that.
Well, and it is, yeah, if there was a contract and agreement made, right? Okay? So what is the, so did we understanding here, let's say you signed a contract that you would work under these conditions, and they signed it saying that they will employ you under these conditions. And then they come back and say, well, we want you to take a vaccination or whatever you want to call it. Then what is that called? It's a breach of contract. Where do you resolve those problems?
Or you renegotiate, right?
That's correct. Either in the courts or renegotiate. If you're not willing to renegotiate and they violate, then you can go to the courts. That's what the courts are for, right? And you can try to get remedy there in the courts, okay?
Speaking of the courts, have you ever heard of jury nullification?
Oh, yeah, yeah. But let me answer this question first, because that's a whole bag of worms there. Let me answer this question, because, so the first is the governor, and it does have, influence over the spending of that money and how it's used. Private companies with a employer to employee contract would have remedy in the courts, right? But what has been the most effective way that we have solved things in the past when employers tried to push something, working conditions that were not acceptable? That's right, unite. What does an employee have that's very valuable to the employer? Their labor, right? Their skill and their labor. So in the past, the most effective way, remember we're asking what works, right? The principles, jurisdiction, and what works. Well, what has worked in the past has always been the employees unite and say, look, we're not okay with this. And they basically force the employer to change their working condition. And what we've done again is we've tried to take the lazy route and say, government, legislature, please save us when we won't unite. And go ahead.
That actually wasn't my question though.
Okay.
So, what I said was in the light of the federal government mandating the employers to force on the employees. So that's a heavy hand, the federal government
right.
coming down, and that's
You're
an
right.
entirely different ball of wax.
Okay, yeah,
That
you're-
I see happening a lot, and I don't know if you've heard that there is a provision in the new spending bill where they're gonna fine businesses over 100 people.
Yeah.
And that scares the living crap out of me, and we need representation at the state level to say, no, you can't do that.
Okay, so you're right. I did not answer your question. I kind of got off.
I was letting you go.
Yeah,
over
so
it.
thank you. So first of all, the remedy, so just let me close this up. The remedy between an employer and employees is really the employees united, okay? And that's proven.
Now you're gonna have a job.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I understand that, right?
Yeah, and there's some great examples. I can give you where there's hospital chains that didn't take the money, and there's hospital chains that did, and those hospital chains that did, their employees are leaving them so fast, and the others are building their hospitals, and they've got, their application are clear full of the most skilled, doctors, nurses, staff. They can pick the best ones, and it's basically principles of free market. Now, to answer your question,
Right.
So the federal government coming down and mandating. So does the federal government have any jurisdiction? Remember, that's over a private business inside a state. No. None. Even if the business has multiple people in multiple states, they have no jurisdiction over that. Okay, and so what is the federal government doing? Mandating businesses in states for, and how are they doing it? They're just doing it, seeing if they're going to get away with it.
Right, because we let them.
That's right, because we let them. And so the best thing to do is not comply, but again, it's kind of scary because you're going up against the federal government. And what is the mechanism for the people when that happens to rely on? Well, unite, but it is the state, right? The state has a duty to say federal government. It is the role of the state to say federal government, hey, wait a minute here, you don't have jurisdiction over these people, and we will protect them, right? That is the role of the state. That's the proper role.
So that's your stance.
That's exactly my stance. Absolutely my stance.
As
And in
government,
fact,
we'll do it.
what happened to my family?
Yeah, right.
The federal government came down upon my family And what did my dad do? He did it for 20 plus years. Well, probably longer than that, but intensely for 20 plus years. He went to the state and he went to the county and he says, look, these are my rights. I have deeds. My family has been here. And it's your duty to defend me. It's your duty to defend me. I'm just a poor rancher. I got a whole bunch of kids and I gotta run cows on this old desert. I don't have the resources to fight the federal government. This is your job. And it's not a fair battle when the federal government and all, most powerful government ever known to man, with the most resources and the largest legal team ever concocted in the history of man, to come down upon a family, little ranching family. And I compare it to like you have a child, and and then you have a parent, and then you have a pedophile. Well, what if the parent says, and the pedophile comes after the child, and the parent just says, well, I'm going to take a neutral position. Because that's what the state of Idaho or Nevada did. That's what the county sheriff did. Well, we're going to take a neutral position. Right? Well, that's not a fair fight. It's the duty of the state, just like it's the duty of the parent. And I'm not saying the state is the parent. Don't get me wrong there. But it is the duty to stand between that pedophile and the child and defend that child even with their life if necessary. And that's the same principle that the state is supposed to do for the people when it comes to any other entity. That's why our officers of state and the federal say take an oath. What is that oath? Has anybody taken that oath here? Taken that oath? What, do you remember what it says at the end?
The Constitution is where.
Yeah, it says to uphold and defend the Constitution against what? Foreign or domestic. Right? It's not just, well, the federal government, we're subsidiaries of the federal government, so whatever they say they can do to us. No. Each officer at each level of government took an oath to defend the Constitution, and the Constitution is a protection of individual rights. So basically, to defend individual rights. And so, absolutely. And in fact, that is largely what that's why I'm running. I see a major problem coming. And I feel like, look, if we're going to try to defend ourselves as individuals, we had better get ready. But the problem is we already have a unit. We already have a mechanism. We already have unity, and it's called the state of Idaho. So why don't we use the resources of the state to properly protect the people like it was designed? The problem is you got to have someone like DeSantis who's going to say, no, you're not doing that. No, I will defend the people. I will unite the people, and I'll use the state's resources. We don't want to fight. But if you're going to come down on us, we will fight. We'll do it legally, we'll do it politically, and we'll even do it physically if we have to. So that's it. So right here and then right here. Because you had a question. Well, I don't know that I want to get into jury nullification. Because I don't know that we have enough time here, and I'd have to lay a whole nother foundation. And so if it's all right, why don't we do that another time? Okay? But I do understand about it, and I've actually seen it apply in my life multiple times. So,
Sorry to ask you so much.
and then let's go here.
We're trying to go back to paper ballots, and I've emailed, letters, phone calls, all my representatives. Lawrence Denny, he's saying that Mike Lindell is lying on his, research on the, election and stuff like that. And like I say, I got no reaction from anybody. I called Shelley, I called everybody, because I worked on the voter thing. I was a chief judge. But I don't know how to go anymore, because they just won't go back to a paper ballot to make sure it's okay, because it's gonna be screwed up.
Well, don't worry. I talked to the Secretary of State. He says everything's okay
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I made that phone call too. So the reality. So actually, I'll tell you a little something, because I had a conversation with a very close friend to President Trump last night, and I'm going to give you some inside information, right? So, he shared that contrary to what everybody's saying, President Trump has not committed and at this point, not planning on running in 2024. And the reason why at this point, why run? Why run if the election's gonna be stolen? If there's nothing you could do, no matter how much money you put into it, how much effort you put into it, how many hearts and minds you change, in the end, if it's gonna be manipulated, then why run? Now, that's his words to me. I'm not putting words in Trump's mouth, and he's not putting words in Trump's mouth. But I'm telling you what was conveyed to me. It was just, I'm telling you this mostly in fun, right? So, if that is the reality, then, why would I run? And that is a big question. And no matter whether in Idaho elections were manipulated or not, there's a lot of people in Idaho that are concerned about it. Just about every single town hall meeting I have, that subject is brought up. And so, this is what we're going to do about it, because I feel like we have to be people of action, and either we're acted upon or we act. So we act or we're acted upon. So we're gonna act. We're gonna do the best we can. I would love to see us go to paper ballots and have 2 or 3 people there from each campaign watching and certifying to make sure that things are going right. We count it all up like we used to in the olden days, and guess what? Whoever's on top's on top, and we have confidence in that. But it doesn't look like they're going to allow that to go back to paper ballots. And it is very concerning because we found out in Ada County that they do a paper ballot, and then they put it through a machine, and the machine counts it. And then it goes on a USB, a jump drive. Okay, then it goes from that jump drive to another jump drive. And then it goes from that jump drive to the Secretary of State, who ends up tallying everything. Now, I don't like that. There's too much opportunity for manipulation, even mistake. And I don't understand why we would go through that process. Especially being in technology and code and all of that. I can see just tons of problems with that. But if we can't get them to change their direction, then the best we can do is keep a very, very close eye on them. So we're with our volunteer army, which is building right now. We're going to have people volunteering. We are having people volunteer to work at the voting booths. We're going to have watchers there. We are building as part of our campaign software where if something is going on, they can film it and they can immediately report it to the campaign. The campaign will have a staff of attorneys, of computer forensic analysis people, direct line to the Secretary of State, so that we can report it while it's happening to the Secretary of State. Say, look, this is going on right now. It is your duty to stop it right now. Not tomorrow when the elections are counted, or when the ballots are counted and the election is called. Right now. Either stop the election or go solve the problem, but we need to work through it right now. Because that's part of what happens. There's all these questions and concerns, but they just move forward anyway. Then they crown a new king, right? And then all these questions are going on. They're not even answered before they already determine who won. So then there's one more thing.
Routers. The routers.
What's that?
The routers are the problem,
Well,
aren't they?
no, but not in Idaho. And
Not in Idaho, that's
I'll connect that. But then there's one more thing as well. And we still, as long as we can keep an eye on those paper ballots, right, and make sure those paper ballots are not manipulated through this whole process, then we can always go back and count the paper ballots. And so we will have a team that can do that. Those are the things that we're going to make sure are in place, okay? But does that mean they could still manipulate it through, if they were connected in routers or through the USB? Yes. And am I falsely accusing somebody of doing that? No, I'm not. I'm just saying that if it is going on, we have to make sure it's not, or do the best we can to keep a close eye on it. And I do want to remind you that having a little bit of a tech background is helpful in this case, right? I do have the people and the manpower and the ability to be able to actually forensically decipher if something has gone on in the counting device, in the USBs, or wherever it might be, as long as we're able to do that and we're able to get
Could
that.
the sheriff, you know, if you were witnessing them doing underhanded stuff, could you call the sheriff and say, I'm
Yeah, that's another aspect
standing
of
here
it.
witnessing them,
Yeah.
you know, cheating?
It will be live time, but it's, most of the time, it's like for example, we had reports of in Nampa where there was, 30 people, Wendy, was it 30 people that didn't speak English, all from the same address, and they're all coming in voting. Now, that is a possibility, right? But that would be something that needed to be filmed, reported, and then immediately investigated, right? Immediately investigated. And how do you do that? Well, the sheriff might need to go to that address immediately. I mean, look, this is the address. But the problem is we can't have the problems and then 2 weeks or 2 months or 9 months later decide that we're gonna try to really buckle down on this. You know, it's too difficult to get everybody back, on the page of electing and all of that. It has to happen right now. It has to happen right then. And the pressure needs to be on them right then. They need to know that the Ammon Bundy for Governor campaign is all over us. So we got to really watch if there is things going on. And so hopefully that answers your question. I don't have a better answer for you.
I know, it's difficult.
So, but that is what we are doing. That is our action we're taking. And we'll do it right alongside any other candidate, because it's all about voter integrity, and everybody loses if somebody is coming in and manipulating our elections. Everybody loses.
On that same vein, is there plans for voter rolls and cleaning those up?
Say that again, what was it?
Voter rolls, so cleaning up who's allowed to vote, who's registered.
Oh, well, I think that's where a lot of the problems coming back. There's claims, and I haven't verified them, but I did watch a video just the other day of a Dr. Frank. Have you heard of him? He's got some pretty compelling evidence that, that they're beefing up the voter rolls and then they're able to, manipulate it off of that. I'm not saying he's right, because I have some questions about like where he's getting his data and that type of stuff, but
Maricopa County said there was it 57,000?
Yeah.
Subject, or votes that they didn't know where they came from?
yeah, that's the problem there. There's a lot of things that just don't make sense. I mean, when you have like upwards into the 90% of people voting in the county, and that doesn't happen.
Right.
90% of the, or if you have more people registered to vote that are on the census, I mean, those are questions that are real questions. And, I think it's disingenuous if the Secretary of State doesn't take it serious that the people of Idaho are concerned. I don't care if he thinks nothing happened or not.
Right.
That doesn't matter. Perception is reality, right? He needs to give the confidence to the people. Open it up. Prove how it didn't happen. And answer your phone call. I think you ought to answer your phone call. So, okay, right here and then right here.
When I'm a representative from California, and in California, they had over 400 voters from Fairhaven Cemetery voted.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
That overturned a congressman, a Republican congressman that had been in office for 14 years, 16 years, something like that.
So from the cemetery, that's interesting. Also, there's a lot, the amount of voters that are, in the late 80s and 90s was, a huge number. And I don't know, maybe older people all vote, I don't know, but there's a lot of questions there, so
Can I change the subject?
please do,
Can you tell
please
me,
do.
can you tell me anything about the red flag law?
Well, yeah, it's a lot like what you brought up. So the red flag laws. So that would be basically that they tag someone as dangerous, so then they go in and take their guns without them even doing anything. That's basically what the red flag laws are.
and it was passed in the state.
I've never heard that it was passed in the state. I know that the federal government has passed certain things. They have also used the Patriot Act as ways to do that, domestic terrorism and so forth. But again, the answer comes down to the state. State saying, look, you're just not gonna do that. I mean, you are not going to come in here and infringe upon the people's rights and try to enforce something without due process. It's just not gonna happen. But it is a reality, and it is something that if the Biden administration could get away with, they would absolutely do it. And in many cases, they are. Now, I want to emphasize, again, like Governor Little, he has said, well, I'm gonna put words in his mouth, so I'm not gonna be exactly right, so don't hold me to it, but I'll be as good as I can. Basically, he's saying that I don't like it, and that's not the words he used, but I don't like it when the federal government comes in and tries to enforce gun laws. He said that. Well, that's good, Governor Little, that you don't like it. But what the heck does that do for anybody else? A governor is supposed to say, you will not do that. You will not do that. And put his manpower, which actually should be the sheriffs, he should be empowering and working with the sheriffs to say, look, you're not going to do that in our county. And that's the difference. That's the difference. That's all I'm offering you. I'm offering you a difference. I'm offering you a choice. And you get to make that choice. You get to make the choice whether you support me financially, whether you support me with your time, whether you talk to your friends about me, whether you vote for me. You get to make that choice. But that's what I'm offering you. I'm offering someone truly saying no. Saying no. Yeah, go ahead and then right here.
I'm sorry about this.
You're right.
A lot of people have the opinion that Little is afraid to push back because he doesn't want to lose funding.
Because he what?
Doesn't want to lose funding from the
That's-
federal government. The emergency mandate because of virus or guns or whatever else lose funding from the federal government.
Okay, so,
Are you willing to forego the funding altogether?
okay, I'm gonna answer that question. So the answer is absolutely.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go further because Governor Little has received $18 billion since 2020 in COVID relief funds. 18 billion, not million, billion dollars.
Wow.
Okay, $1 billion.
Where's it at?
Comes from the federal government. Well,
can't
if,
spend that kind of
I
money.
could blow your mind actually, if you want me to, because he actually in order 2020-07, Executive Order 2020-07, if you want to go look at it, basically in essence it says that I put the state of emergency, the Idaho in the state of emergency on March 13th. I put the state of put the Idaho in extreme state of emergency on March 25th. And because I did this, the state qualifies for all these federal fundings, COVID relief fundings. That's why he put us in emergency. He didn't put us in emergency for COVID.
Right.
Right? We never ever had any type of numbers to be ever considered any type of pandemic or anything like that. He put us so he qualified, the state qualified. And then he says in the order, and the Congress has passed all this money, so we're gonna get it. And then he says, I am creating a committee of people that I choose, and it actually says in the order, that serve at my pleasure. Or it actually says, serve at the pleasure of the governor. And together we get to determine how these funds are spent, and they're spent out of the office of the governor. Now, how are state funds supposed to be spent? What? Out of the legislature, not the governor. He has literally taken all this money to the office of the governor. He got his buddies together that serve at his pleasure, and they get to decide how they're going to spend
Do we know how the
$18
money's
billion.
being spent?
What's that?
Do we know how the money's being spent?
We don't. I mean, I'm sure we could maybe look into it, but maybe. Because he has just bypassed everything. He has created a whole different government. And I don't even want to get into that, because then we could get into martial law orders, that's what he used in order to put us in extreme state of emergency. State statute 46601. That doesn't basically say, it says that all the agencies of government, or it doesn't say branches anyway, basically are under the governor. And so now he's enacted that, and now he's got all this funds. And who knows, when did the, can anybody tell me what date the emergency orders ended?
Supposed to be 30 days.
But when did they end?
Oh, they have never.
Can you
The
say-
governor did it temporarily.
They have not ended. He has never lifted those orders. We are still under the emergency order, which is 46601, martial law's authority of the governor. Think about that. Now those laws were only supposed to last for 30 days. Then if they were an extreme state, he can extend them to another 60 days. And after that, he was supposed to turn the power over to back to the legislature. He's refused to do that. And the legislature, by law, is supposed to assemble on the 90th day. Well, when we inform them of that, they get all the lawyers in charge. And guess what the governor's lawyer said? Well, the legislature can't assemble without the governor's permission. And so what the legislature say? Okay, we can't assemble without the governor's permission. So think about that. You've got the executive branch, the governor, the executive branch, who's supposed to be equal with the legislative branch, right? You got the executive branch usurping power and putting the people under martial law orders, right? That's right. And the law says that when that happens, the legislatures are supposed to come together and with a concurrent resolution and end the order. Okay? But they say they can't come together because the executive branch says they don't have permission. How much sense does that make? And that's what I'm talking about. Our legislature is lost. They're weak. They need leadership. There's a good old boys club, and they've got in control of the Speaker of the House is part of that good old boys club. The pro temp of the Senate is part of that good old boys club, and they are literally uniting together.
Are they both Republican?
And what's that?
Are they both Republican?
All of them are Republican. Because we have an identity crisis going on in Idaho. Are we conservative or are we Republican? It's not the same thing, my friends. Especially when you're talking about rhino establishment Republicans. Don't get me wrong, the Republican platform. Okay.
Media's done a pretty good job of painting a big black cloud over your head. How are you gonna unpaint that cloud?
Okay, I'm going to do a fun little exercise that I've done in many, many, many cases all over the state. And I'm going to see how it goes because I never know how it's going to go. I have a pretty good indication because I've done it so many times now. Everybody, so the Idaho Statesman's kind of the big paper, and it's claims to be the most influential paper in Idaho, right? So anybody in this room who's subscribed to the Idaho Statesman, raise your hand. No, that is subscribed right now to the Idaho Statesman, raise your hand. I'll be dang. There's not one person in here that's subscribed to the Idaho Statesman? Okay, so let me tell you something. I have met with hundreds and hundreds of people all over Idaho. Northern, here, Boise. Even one of them was at the Boise State Amphitheater. All over out east, everywhere. How many people do you think have raised their hand that subscribe to the Idaho Statesman? And all the people, I mean, I've been around the state twice. I put almost 10,000 miles on that RV already. Okay? How many people do you think have subscribed to the Idaho Statesman?
12.
Who said that?
Hopefully 0.
12.
You said 12? Someone said 5? Okay, I'm going to get up here high where everybody can see. 0. Not one person in all the times I've met with somebody has been subscribed to the Idaho Statesman.
How are they in business?
So I'll tell you in just a sec. I just figured it out today. So, well, I have an idea.
It's not just
So
the
listen.
paper though, it's
So
also the news,
I
media.
understand that. I'm making this point.
Right.
But But again, you would have never believed that thousands of people have, in Idaho, that I've been meeting with, and more than half of you've never heard me before, so it's not like you're, following me around. This is an entire new group. There's only a couple people that I've seen in other meetings, right? And one of them goes to every one of them with me. Thank you, Wendy. So ultimately what it boils down to is the 12 and a half people that are subscribed to the Idaho Statesman just really don't matter. They're never going to vote for me anyway. We have been led to believe that they have a lot of influence, and they don't. They don't have the influence they think they want us. They know they don't. They do not have the influence. And we need to stop thinking they have the influence. We need to stop letting them manipulate us. Because they just simply don't. I'm going to give you a little bit of evidence. And then it's 8:30, so I can't believe how fast time has flown here. So we do need to wrap it up. But I want to show you this, because I think this is worth bringing up or showing. So Gem State Patriot News run a poll. Okay? And polls are only a snapshot in time, right? But the interesting thing about the Gem State Patriot News is they have always been kind of the echo chamber for Janice McGinn, who is also running she's a lieutenant governor, and she's running for governor, right? And so the fact that they ran this poll and they asked, let me get it here, I'm almost there. They asked the question of, okay, here it is, of who do you support for Idaho governor in 2022? Simple question, right? Now this has always been, the paper who's give Janice kind of her platform and their readers and have always been the kind of the Janice McGinn support and all of that. So that's why we were most interested. We really wanted to know how this poll would go because, there's some people that have connected our principles and so forth together, and she comes off like she's conservative and so forth. So I was curious to where I was at. And to be honest with you, I thought, if I'm within 10% of her or even 15%, then being she's the lieutenant governor, that's probably a good thing. And if I could keep gaining more ground, then it would be encouraging for me. Well, do you guys want to know the results?
Yeah.
Okay. There's okay, the poll, let me actually go. I can give you that answer. So the poll was created 1 month ago. Okay? And it's reached almost 2,700 people, which is a pretty good sized poll. 2,700 people have voted, right? Which, anybody who knows the polling is, sometimes they'll do polling, 100 people, 300, 400, you get over 500 people and it starts to be a pretty good sized poll. Well, this is quite a large poll.
Statewide?
Well, they're accessed statewide, right? But however far it's a statewide publication. But remember, we're talking about those who are, subscribers and use this and read the Gem State Patriot News. Thank you. So remember, polls they're not everything. They're just snapshot in time. But this one was particularly interesting. So right now, as it stands, Janice McGinn is 32%. 32%. Okay. Ammon Bundy is at 61.3%.
Wow.
Ed Humphrey is at 3.3. Brad Little is 1.9. Melissa Sue Robbins is 0.6. And others is 0.1. So remember.
1.0.
Excuse me, 1.0. Yeah. So, yes, 1.0. And so, like, don't, we can't lead into that that's too much, and, that's the way the elections are gonna go. We're talking about a very specific group of people, right? And we already know, we have other numbers, we've commissioned other surveys, and I would love to go through them with you, but that show us, like, really where we're at statewide. And they're really favorable, but they're not that favorable, okay? But again, we do, I'm kind of getting into this. Look, it's not always. Most of the time, it's not what we think. It's not what the media is feeding us. It's not what they want us to believe. What they feed us. They want us to just not do our own research, not do our own thinking, and just eat what they tell us, right? And believe that. But I'm telling you, Idaho and Idahoans are not thinking the same as they maybe have thought in the past. 2020 changed us and shook us up and woke us up. And woke is the wrong word. Has awakened us. Has awakened us, right?
The real woke.
Yeah, the real woke. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that, because if you look around the rest of the world, if we had a meeting like this, we'd all be thrown in jail. Or we couldn't even leave our house. Right? We are more free in Idaho than pretty much anywhere in the world. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because we will not accept anything else. And so we must not let that go. We must not let that go. And I hope that it doesn't come down to individuals like my family having to fight on their own and go through all the suffering and pain. Let's use the unity that we created. Let's use the state to do that. And that's what I ultimately am offering you and asking, and why I'm asking you to support. And you may not agree with me on everything. You may not. And we can talk about that. I'll debate it. I'm a pretty good debater. We might even argue about that. But I want you to know one thing. I will defend you. I will stand at my own, and I prove it, that I will stand at my own risk and defend our liberties together. And I believe that is loving your neighbor as yourself. And so with that, I thank you for your time. I'm grateful. I'm going to ask Wendy to come and say a few things. She's going to ask you for money. But she's, just listen to her, and we do have to have your support. We have to have your support. Governor Little collected $3.5 million in 2018.
Is that from the federal government?
Well, yeah, now we don't know where the 18 billion begins and where it ends, right? But what's he gonna do in 2022? And we've already seen what they're building. What they're going to, the assault. And we can't let them manipulate us to believing what they're gonna say, because they're gonna do it very crafty. And two, is we need to be able to counter that. Well, I am certain that with $1.5 million, I can do what they'll do with $4 million. I'm certain of that. I know that, right? But guess what? I don't have $1.5 million of my own money to spend on a campaign, and neither should I have to pay $1.5 million spent on a campaign. I want to be a servant to the people, but I don't want to be a slave. And what's the difference? A servant, the people pay at least for his living, right? So we have to say, look, our liberty means something to us. And it might mean $20 a month for the next 12 months. It might mean maybe more than that. Maybe less if you can. But it means something. And it's got to translate into, either your time or your money or both. It's got to translate into action. And so, with that, a precursor, Wendy. There you go.